Oh, I knew the day would come when I had to get in there. Wait a minute, Meredith. This isn't the shop? Well, yeah, I know. I figured I'd start bringing you along with me to see some of my projects out in the field. Today, we're working on a 2YM15, and we've got a coolant leak, and we want to service our heat exchangers. That's what I'm going to work on. This engine is stuffed into a really tight space, so, we're going to have to take some things off just to access our manifold here. Now I've already got the belt cover off, so I have access to this alternator, and we are gonna remove the alternator, which of course is oh so much fun because none of these bolts come all the way out. And this alternator doesn't actually have the room to swing. So we're just gonna, remove the actual mounting brackets and just see if we can't get it to come loose that way. That will give us access to the front so I can get some hoses off. Most likely I'm going to take the entire manifold off this engine. It makes it easier to access, and the end caps to the heat exchanger, the bolts that are in there, they love to break, and so I just want the whole manifold, out so we can work on it a little bit easier. Alright, now we're ready to get this coolant drained, otherwise we're going to make a big mess. So I need my 3mm Allen head socket here, and the coolant drain is on this lower coolant hose. You'll see where I go here in a sec. And I love using these little aluminum bread pans because they're so flexible, and you can kind of mush them into place. And then I use my oil extractor to suck the coolant out of the pan as it's draining into the pan. So it actually works for like a really clean coolant drain without having to like dump it in the bilge, because there's no room here for like a proper bucket. Alright, so we're making progress. I'm going to take this whole manifold off. And these bolts, there's no room to get them all the way out, but luckily they're bolts, not studs. So we'll get the hoses off, and then get all the mounting bolts, get the exhaust elbow taken off, and then I'll be able to take the manifold home, because these little bolts, if they've never been touched before, they tend to snap off. So we're going to just take it back to the shop, be very gentle, or at least try it here, and go from there. First thing we need to do, we need to get the raw water seacock at the sail drive turned off. Oh, I guess we get to grab the pliers for that one. Now that we've got our seacock closed, I'm good to take off all my seawater hoses and start working on getting this exhaust elbow assembly taken off. I just replaced this a couple years ago, so I know the exhaust elbow is good, so we're just going to remove it from the manifold and just flop it out of the way. Now, one of the things I always tell people to check is to pull their elbow off once in a while and look up inside and make sure there's no evidence of seawater going towards the manifold. Now, I replaced this elbow a couple years ago, so I know it's in good shape. We put new hose in, and it's still very flexible. And so, you know, everything's been really good so far on this. So I'm going to undo, these hoses are all undone. I'm going to undo these two bolts, and I should be able to at least pull it out enough to get this other hose to where I can actually put a wrench on that hose clamp, and then we'll have our little manifold off. Would you believe me if I told you guys are actually hanging on a piece of rope right now? You're suspended in midair. I forgot to bring the tripod, so I'm sorry for the kind of crappy angles, but at least you're able to see, you know, most of what I'm talking about today. So we're gonna get these guys off. Looks like a 13 as well. These newer Yanmars really love 13 millimeter, which is fine by me, but the older ones really liked 12 millimeters. So when these kind of first came out, it was kind of a change to switch to 13. There we go. Now when I put this back together, we will be using, you know, anti-seize just like on everything else. And that's what really makes these come apart nicely in the future. This engine's still fairly new, and so I don't expect the hardware, you know, to be bad or anything, but, you know, it's, we still want to make sure it's in good shape. So I'm really, really grateful for the fact that this, manifold doesn't use studs. It's a lot easier. I mean, it's easier in terms of like hanging the gasket and then sliding the manifold on, but like in a space that is this tight, if it did have studs, I'd be forced to like pull the manifold away as far as I could get it, and then you know, try to undo the stud from behind it, which is really, really hard. So let's see if we can't get this thing off. There we go. And oops, I forgot my thermostat hose. Let's get that off real quick. Should have done that when I was up front. This engine hasn't had anything done to it hose-wise, so all the clamps and stuff are in places that don't make sense for this space. I can tell where I've been because like clamps like this, when I did the elbow, I aimed it in a place where I could tighten it, you know, from inside the boat as opposed to outside. But when we put this all back together, we'll certainly, you know, make sure it's all orientated the way I want it, since I'm the one who mostly does the work on this engine. So All right, let's take our baby pliers. See if we can't get this off from back here. I don't feel like crawling all the way to the front. Ah, there we go. Stupid vented loop hose is really in the way. Can we cheat and just pull this out as is? I don't know. We shall see. There we go. Why, hello, little manifold. This thing is like so cute. Alright, now we can get this hose clamp off. Make that a little easier on us. This is like the cutest little manifold I've ever seen. It's a little, 2YM20. And, so they're small little engines, but they're just as good as the bigger ones. They actually assemble these just like, full-size engines. So the way the crankshaft and everything is mounted is similar to how you'd see on like a Cummins or something bigger, which is pretty cool. So they're assembled like grown-up engines, and there we go. Make sure we got our salt water out. We did good a job at draining the coolant. So let's get this little tiny vent hose off, and then we'll be ready to continue. Right, we've got our manifold off, and we finally got some working space on this side of the engine. So looks like something was dripping there at some point. Doesn't look like anything from above, so I'm curious if something was spilled. This kind of had some salty coolant. I know this is bad, so but why it was leaking here, unless somebody opened the cap and it just kind of, flooded. It also could be that freeze plug. So we may be ordering a new manifold. All right, so now that we have this manifold, one of the things I'm noticing is the evidence of a leak. And see how that leak runs all the way back here? Not enough, I mean, it goes all the way down the block, but it's not enough to show up, like underneath the engine. And so, like I've been coming every year to service this engine for some time, and, if I saw coolant underneath, I would certainly note that. But we are losing coolant. And so the heat exchanger is one of my original things that I want to have tested. But on the back of the manifold, and I'll show you this in a second, I'm suspecting either a crack, or you can actually see this is where one of the freeze plugs is sitting. That freeze plug may be leaking and allowing rusty coolant to find its way, out of the manifold. We also had a starter issue, and that's why my multimeter was out. And with this guy, we've got a little bit of corrosion, and this is in fact loose, so I'm gonna start that up. It still cranks the engine fine, but while we have the access to the starter, I'm gonna try to clean that up a bit, because this is completely buried. When everything else is in place, you can't even think about getting to the starter. This engine doesn't exactly make it easy, because that gear housing sticks out in front of kind of this side of the engine. So while we have this cavity opened up, we want to take advantage of anything that might need to be done in this area while we're in here. These never come easy, so it's actually really nice to finally have these come nicely for once. And we'll make sure they stay that way because we'll anti-seize them when they go back together. This manifold isn't all that old. This is, like I said, this is a newer YM. I want to say it was like 2018 or something. So like not nearly as old as what I'm used to working on. I go grab a hammer. There's a piece of impeller. Okay, so what you guys might not realize is this end piece comes off and the actual tube bundle core, you know, will come through. So we need to pop this loose. Let's see if we can't use one of my pocket screwdrivers. And this just pops loose real easy like that, and it comes off. And then there's a second O-ring in here. And not to worry, these O-rings will be replaced. I don't care if I destroy them. There we go. Now this flange piece that was separate from the tube bundle on this side is actually attached to the end. So this heat exchanger does only fit one way. So we're going to give this thing some love taps and see if we can't knock it out. There we go. And I'm using a rubber mallet. I'm going to move you back here. There we go. Check out all that lovely salt. That's delicious right there. Yep, it was time to change our coolant. This exhaust looks good. We'll get the gasket off this because I want to show you something about these manifolds that you really need to check with your exhaust. A tip for working with these aluminum manifolds: when you're using a razor blade, be very careful because that razor can actually score your mounting surface. So just make sure the razor is nice and flat and you'll be good, but take your time. So one of the things I want to show you is this mounting flange for our exhaust elbow. And don't worry about the crud in there. This thing's going to get cleaned up really well. But this whole manifold is cast aluminum. And the elbow and the assembly are stainless. And aluminum and stainless, if you know anything about metallurgy, they do not like each other. So over time, that stainless elbow is going to start to eat away at this aluminum. And you can already see kind of the very beginning of it where it's starting to get like pitted. You can see this pitting. Everything out here is nice and smooth. So this thing is not destroyed yet. But this pitting will go out. It will begin to expand to the point where there's no sealing surface left. And at that point, you're going to have to replace the whole manifold. I actually had to do this on my engine. I noticed a leak back here. And it had corroded through to the point where the coolant that was in the housing was actually leaking past this flange. Even though this is dry, it's still surrounded by coolant. And so that was, at the time, they were selling these for my 3-cylinder for like $3,900. So I was grateful that I could at least get a new one. And it does last for years. Let me be clear about that. This doesn't happen in only a few years. This engine, I think, is at least 10 years old. And so, you know, it's been years of having, you know, that elbow mounted to the aluminum flange. However, that seems to be an issue with these modern Yanmars. They've started making their manifolds out of aluminum, which is great for corrosion resistance, but not so great mounted to an exhaust elbow that's stainless. The final thing I'm going to check for, which will determine if we just replace this whole assembly, is I want to make sure that there's no crack, because it looks like there could be a crack, even in multiple places. Now, I don't know if this engine has ever been dramatically overheated. I know it hasn't been overheated since my current customer has owned this engine. However, previously, who knows? And so I want to check that, and we'll replace this freeze plug. If that's not a crack, then I'll go ahead and replace the freeze plug, and we'll get this thing all cleaned up and rebuilt. We'll service the heat exchanger because it does look like it's leaking. So I'll send that out to a radiator shop so they can clean that up, and we'll clean everything else up and get it all put back together. Well, guys, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. I'm going to Magnaflux this thing off camera probably tomorrow or something. It's late. I think it's around midnight. Yeah, it is. And if you want to see the process of Magnafluxing or checking for cracks, check out my video. It's about a client forgetting to open their seatcock. I go into depth about that process and show you guys how to do it on a cylinder head if you want to learn how to do that. Anyways, Oakham and I are going to go to bed, and I will see you guys in the next one.